What's up, everybody? We're back to get it started again on Bryan Kohberger, as some breaking news has come out that a lot of you want to discuss in a video to see how it could potentially affect the Idaho 4 investigation and the Idaho 4 case. Because apparently, Kohberger is now being investigated in other similar crimes to which he is charged here. So hit that like button if you still are interested in the Bryan Kohberger and Idaho 4 content. Subscribe to the page if you haven't already, because we're going to jump in and talk about how this could potentially become relevant. We are going to watch a short clip from News Nation, who broke the news, if this is really news. And I want to listen to, I haven't listened to the whole clip yet, but I do want to think about how we know at this point. And I think what's interesting about following so many trials and talking about so many different legal terms and arguments and rules, that we start to learn as a group, even if you're not a lawyer, how this could potentially become relevant. And we heard in the Murdaugh case tons of argument about other bad acts, similar fact, evidence, and things like that. So could these other crimes potentially come in as other bad acts? Could these other crimes be similar facts? Could they build a modus operandi, an MO, the way that Bryan Kohberger commits his crimes? That is how it would become relevant to this case. Or are they just blowing smoke? Are they saying things like, we have serial killers sometimes that admit to all sorts of crimes once they're convicted of one. We have serial killers who sometimes admit to crimes they didn't even commit. So is it just something like that? Are they just trying to blow this up? Or is this something that prosecutors are trying to just stack on charges to put pressure and add leverage to make Bryan Kohberger take a plea deal? That's also something that happens in the legal world. Is it something more like that? Or do they actually have something that connects Bryan Kohberger to other similar crimes? Because just saying that a crime like this was committed in the past somewhere where Bryan Kohberger lived is not going to be enough. And it, excuse me. And it seems like Pennsylvania law enforcement is confirming that they are in fact investigating him. Pennsylvania law enforcement, DA, public defender, seems like they're cooperating a lot more with the media because maybe they don't think the gag order applies to them, and maybe it doesn't, because we haven't heard of any Idaho law enforcement coming out saying they're connecting him to other cases like this. But let's take a listen and see if it's just speculation or if they actually have things connecting Bryan Kohberger to other similar crimes. Because if they do, we will talk about the ways it could absolutely and directly affect this case after we watch the clip.
Begin tonight with the breaking news that happened in the last hour. Chris Cuomo reporting exclusively from law enforcement sources that Bryan Kohberger, the suspect in the Idaho murders, is now being investigated for possible additional murders in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, remember, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in.
So you notice how this says in the state of Pennsylvania. I've seen a bunch of media articles that are saying all over the place, multiple jurisdictions, cold cases, closed cases. This is specific to Pennsylvania because I think that is who they are talking to. They actually are in contact with Pennsylvania law enforcement.
Albrightsville, Pennsylvania on December 30th. It's a month and a half after the brutal killings of the University of Idaho students Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonzalez. We know Kohberger grew up in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania before moving out to Washington State near the Idaho border for grad school. We also know he previously graduated from Northampton Community College in Pennsylvania in 2018, and that while there, he worked security for the Pleasant Valley School District. He also
all legitimate connections to Pennsylvania. And again, if crimes were committed where he was a security guard, maybe that's a connection. At one of the schools he went to, maybe that's a connection. But right now, they're just talking about a bunch of connections and saying there are crimes committed in that area. There's crimes committed in that area, my guess is every single day. That doesn't mean it's connected to Kohberger. So I'm interested to hear if this news breaking report actually has some connections. And I'm not blaming News Nation. People are interested in this. People want to hear about it. I'm just looking at it from my angle and the legal lens to see if this is actually something that is going to apply to this case or if it is, in fact, a nothing burger.
So attended nearby DeSales University until 2022. Both schools about an hour away from where his parents live. Now, when news of Kohberger's arrest first broke, Pennsylvania authorities said they were going to go back with a fine-tooth comb. They were going to look at open and cold cases that may have fit the MO of the Idaho killer. It was one of...
So there are some generalities. As soon as he was arrested, they're like, ooh, let's go look at some cold cases. That's way too general and broad to actually affect this case. But when you add the qualification that it has to be a similar MO to this case, what does that mean? Do you ever think about that when they say a similar MO? Because this is something we've had to argue in other cases where they've tried to bring in similar bad acts or other bad acts or similar fact evidence. Other stabbings is not going to be enough. Other victims in their 20s, other attractive female victims is not going to be enough. Other sorority sisters, not going to be enough. Other crimes on college campuses, usually not going to be enough for it actually to come in as evidence. Now, for them to report on it, maybe so, but not enough for it to actually come in as evidence. But if you have all of those things, stabbings, sorority girls in a house on a college campus, then maybe you start getting somewhere with similar MO, similar facts, similar crimes. So we'll see how many of these dots they actually connect.
One of the first things that local officials did, looking for any connection between Kohberger and unsolved cases in the area. Kohberger remains in an Idaho jail tonight, awaiting his preliminary hearing in June. Authorities have said he has no official and known prior criminal record. Joining me now on this breaking news is former CIA and FBI agent Tracy Walder. She's also a News Nation national security contributor. Thanks very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. So I guess it shouldn't be that surprising that this investigation started, right, in the state of Pennsylvania. But now the fact that they may have identified particular cases, that sure is a development.
So I like what he did there. Not surprising that they may look into this stuff or may do investigations. Again, it could come up with nothing. It's very common that they do things like this. Once they have somebody in custody, they have their DNA now, they have their fingerprints. So let's run it against all the other stuff to see if we can solve any other mysteries. But the breaking news is it seems that they have kind of zeroed in on him as a legitimate potential suspect in some particular unsolved similar crimes. That's the interesting part.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Dan. So, I think really what investigators had at their disposal now, once he was arrested, was really access to VICAP, or the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And really what they have there is the benefit of basically going into a database clearinghouse and looking for crimes that had similar patterns, similar manner of death, similar motivations, those kinds of things. And I think that really probably helped them put the pieces of the puzzle together, as well as now having his DNA, because quite frankly, if they did have a murder, his DNA wouldn't have come up as a hit. As you mentioned, he had no prior criminal record. So
I just realized I was muted. So let's try that again. No criminal history is the important part here. Because if he did have criminal history, they already had his DNA, his fingerprints, they would have already run him through all this stuff. But because he is now in the system, it is not at all uncommon for them to run through his DNA and fingerprints in anything they can to potentially solve an unsolved crime that is similar in nature to this one. Now, also, when I was saying for it to come in as other bad acts in that MO, that's one thing. But if they have, let's say it was done with a different kind of weapon like a gun or a car, any kind of deadly weapon, let's say a different crime was committed with that, but they have his DNA there, sure. That comes in. It's not the only way you can connect him to another case is the same MO. Okay. And I just wanted to make that clear because we were talking about other bad acts, Williams rule, similar fact evidence, other prior crimes. If you can prove he did something else with a gun, that's going to come in as well as a prior similar crime, prior bad act, of course. But the MO is more specific than just other bad acts and other similar crimes.
I think the fact that he has committed other crimes is perhaps not surprising.
And,
now that to me is a bridge too far. This guy is an accused defendant. He is presumed innocent. And the fact that she says, well, the fact that he's committed other crimes wouldn't be surprising to me is frustrating. And she's a former CIA and FBI, probably incredibly smart, incredibly intuitive. But it shows that once they arrest somebody, law enforcement usually thinks they did it, regardless of if they are the ones that made the arrest, right? And maybe that's an overgeneralization on my part, but she is speaking as if he committed these crimes and as if she is not surprised that he's also committed other crimes for which he's barely named a suspect and being investigated for. So that's the thing I don't like about just because they're running his DNA and fingerprints through the violent crimes, unsolved crime database. Now we've taken the step to, yeah, he's probably committed other crimes as well. That's what I don't like about this whole process and about this report and about things like this.
again, this often happens in these investigations, right? Suspect is arrested in one place for a crime, somewhere else, and then they begin an investigation and turn up other information.
Exactly. I mean, this is probably more common than not. And also, I think if you just look at the nature of this crime, this is an individual that went into a house where there was potentially 5 people there that he would have had to kill. I think he probably had some experience in doing this.
I mean, he did it, if you ask her. He went into this house and did this. And he had experience. No ifs, no allegedly, which I might be nitpicking at this point, right? She's doing a news show. She's just talking about the case. And maybe in her head, she's thinking, this is the accused, allegedly. But I'm just saying for our mind and the way that we talk about it, let's make sure we in this community talk about it the right way, that allegedly he did this. And if he did, it wouldn't be surprising if he had experience. That's fine. I just don't like the conviction that's already happened in some discussions.
Sort of all of those signatures and all of that evidence point to the fact that this was probably not his first time attempting something like this. It may not have been against 5 people, but it may have been him experimenting, doing something like this against one person or perhaps even 2. And also, he does have a history of sort of erratic, perhaps sexist behavior.
He has a history of erratic and sexist behavior. Where is she getting that information? From social media posts? From witnesses saying it on news stations or posting about it that they know him and he said this or he did this? Because I haven't seen any of it come in as actual evidence, come in as being reliable, not being hearsay, unreliable hearsay that's not going to come in at trial. So this is what I don't like about building this profile as if we know who Bryan Kohberger is because somebody said something on a news station, because there's a gag order. Most of the evidence has been sealed in this case. We haven't even gotten to the preliminary hearing yet. And she's already built his profile, said that he's committed these crimes, and assumed that he's also committed other crimes as practice or experimentation before this crime. This is not how it's supposed to look, even for the worst of the worst and the people that we think committed heinous crimes. This is not how it's supposed to be done. And this right here is why there's a gag order. Because potential jurors watching this are now thinking, wow, We have to stop this guy. He's sexist. He's sporadic or whatever she said. He's committed other crimes to practice to then commit this heinous crime. Because he wouldn't have been able to commit this heinous crime without practice and committing other crimes before. That's the problem. And that's why there's a gag order. Because we, as a nation, do stuff like this in the media. And again, I know it sounds like I'm condemning them. I don't blame them for having these discussions. I just wish they would qualify them as whoever did this would probably have this profile. Whoever did this, research has shown, has probably committed other crimes. Fine. But putting it like it's signed, sealed, delivered Bryan Kohberger, that's where I get a little frustrated with the process.
And sort of a hatred towards women. So it's really not surprising.
He has a hatred towards women. And this is the other thing we talk about. Like, let's just say in a crazy world, because it does happen once in a while, that they got the wrong guy, he goes to trial and he wins. Or better yet, the state realizes they got the wrong guy and they drop the charges. Thousands of people are going to watch other people say that he has a hatred towards women. Because now that's already out there, regardless of if he committed this crime or not. But he's sexist and has a hatred towards women and has probably committed other crimes because there's unsolved mysteries where he was a security guard and went to college. My guess is there's unsolved murders in Tallahassee. I lived there for 7 years. Does that make me a suspect? I'm not saying it couldn't happen, and I'm not saying he didn't commit other crimes. He absolutely could have committed other crimes. I'm trying to make sure we understand the conversation we're having here, and I'd like it to be a little bit different on this channel than the conversation they're having in this interview.
Some of this come out now.
And it's possible, by the way, that they're going back in cases that they thought they had a suspect, right? And maybe they didn't even have the right person, and they were looking the wrong way.
Absolutely. We look at this and how he was.
Because that, in fact, does happen. You think you have a suspect and you realize you're looking the wrong way. So let's not convict every suspect, every accused, every person charged. Because both of them admittedly are right now saying sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they suspect the wrong person.
Was found partially was because of that familial DNA. And really, no one in his family would have had their DNA in any kind of criminal system. No one in there had.
Do we know that? That no one in his family has been in the criminal system? Maybe immediate family. I don't really know how far they're going with this. I don't know how far you can track DNA back, but I didn't. This is news to me.
Criminal record. No one had DNA taken. And so it's quite possible that they had built another suspect around other characteristics that he was nowhere on their radar.
Fascinating stuff. Tracy Walder, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Because sometimes the right suspect is not even on your radar at different points throughout the case. So how can this affect the Idaho 4 case if it comes out to be true and they charge him with other crimes? Or they have enough to get over, again, because in Murdaugh, you don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt these other bad acts or other crimes or MO or motive, but just clear and convincing evidence. Can they connect him to other murders or other crimes? And if they can, wow, is that going to be damning? He's done this before, members of the jury. He has committed similar heinous crimes against similar victims with a similar MO. Here's the evidence we know. Back where he was a security guard, he did this or that. That's going to be damning in the trial if it were to come in. And additionally, whether or not they seek the death penalty, this will absolutely be a consideration. And then sentencing, if they don't seek the death penalty, the judge can consider other crimes, other bad acts. So it can come in the guilt phase, sentencing phase, death penalty phase, depending on how this case progresses. This could absolutely be relevant and potentially become the biggest piece of evidence. Because as we've seen in cases throughout my career and as we all watched together in Murdaugh, those other bad acts can be huge and can turn him into a generally bad guy that the jury, even if there's not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, they feel like I can't let this guy go back into society, and pushes them even more towards conviction. It's all possibilities at this point. But if it were to come in, that's how it would affect this case. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think if there's anything there or just a nothing burger. Let me know if you agree with them. You just think he's done it. And at this point, we might as well figure out the profile and what else he's done, because we already know he's done this. Or if you're sticking to allegations, allegedly, the suspect may have, if, words like that, until it's proven in a court of law. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.